So I've got my document up on a tablet, and the screen decided to. Right, here we go. Local people know there's considerable S106 and SIL money arising from the new housing developments, and that it's spent by the Vale and Oxford County Council and Farringdon Town Council on a variety of things. Well, items in S106 agreements are sometimes very specific. For SIL, there is some discretion how the money is spent. There's the what was going to be the Wantage Leisure Centre money. I think the Vale is deciding quite what to do with it. And for Farringdon, that's about £220,000. I suspect it's tricky because it's all in an S106 agreement. There's a Park Road agreement that's got about £300,000 for sport, leisure and community facilities. And there's south of Highworth Road, which has about 400,000 in SIL, which will come to Farringdon over 3 years, and its use is unspecified. But I'm sure the town council officers are keeping track of all this. But I mean, Farringdon's unlikely to have such significant amounts of money for its improvement for many years. So it's important it's used and achieved the best for Farringdon. And I know there's a start with the questions on the recent community survey. We know that for at least some of the developer money to be released, business case and quotes are required. Some of the money is in the hands of town council, some in the hands of the Vale, but whoever has the responsibility, it's important that the town council and the town work together to make sure it's spent in the best possible way. So my request is that a statement of whatever monies there are and what their sources are and what their potential is should be made available to the town so that everybody's clear of the possibilities. And then my second point is a request to establish a 106 SIL group so that councillors and townspeople can work on project plans together. That's it.
Thank you, Jenny. I think the plan is for this. We will discuss it at a strategic working party meeting, which I hope we're going to arrange for January. Then it will come to town council. Just looking at SIL monies so far, I think the biggest tranche we've got is I think it's 38,140, which is going to come from the home bargains, and Portway, I think that's eligible for SIL, which is about 5,500. We don't know what the final sum for Highworth Road, which we didn't expect to be still eligible, but that would be a considerable chunk of money. But I quite agree that we do need a strategy on spending, because that's our main source of income.
I think one of the main things is you'll probably be asked by the Vale, I'm guessing this, to justify how that 220,000 could be used in Farringdon. Absolutely. Otherwise, it'll just slip out of our hands.
Yeah. I think that's the problem. I think that at the moment, the rules don't seem to be very well established, but I suspect there's going to be a sting in the tail on this one, so that we will have to have a very good idea, because I have a horrible feeling if this new white paper goes through, that we will be also eligible for infrastructure improvements, which would normally have fallen on the county council, like things like roads and whatever. So okay. I suspect some of our share may go down, so we'll have to watch this space. Thank you very much, Jenny, for that time contribution. Thank you. Right, back to my, find the agenda again. Item 6 then is Solar Street scheme, and Marcia is going to explain that to us.
Yes, hi everybody. So we have here joining us today Andy Tunstall. Sorry, I don't know whether that is the correct pronunciation. He's the director of the Green Group, and he works in collaboration with IDEA. So he's here to give us a presentation in regards to the Solar Street schemes that was proposed to be brought to Farringdon to residents and business. So Andy, you're free to, you're welcome to speak.
Okay, well, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to present to you today. I've got a presentation that's going to take about 15 minutes, and then there's plenty of time to answer a few questions afterwards. So I'm hoping that I can share the screen and launch a presentation. Can everybody see that?
Not yet.
Yep.
No.
Okay. Hang on.
No.
Hang on.
Nothing here.
Oh, I know why. Hang on. How about that?
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me a sec. Okay, is that still coming through?
Yeah, that's fine, Andy.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Right. I'll get going. Cracking on.
You can go
So-
full screen if you want on. That's it. Fine.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you. So, as Marcia explained here, this is a presentation we've made to several councils, which hopefully will explain what the scheme's all about. It's basically combines three elements: the renewable energy company themselves, IDEA, ourselves as the Green Group, as if you like, the marketing end of it, and a combination of the local climate group and the council within an area. So I think this is the case with Farringdon, but what has happened in most of the towns where we're working with is that a climate emergency has been declared with a view to achieving carbon neutral by 2030 with respect to comparing to 1990. And why solar panels are interesting in this is because each domestic installation of a typical size saves 1 tonne of carbon per year. So as many, the more houses they can get solar panels on, then obviously the more carbon can be saved for the town. What the Solar Streets campaign is about bringing affordable solar PV to the roof of people's in the town with an added contribution for each installation into a community fund. So the people behind it are a company called IDEA Renewable Energy Systems. They've been in business since 2008, which means that they're quite long established in the renewable energy sector, and they've sort of lived through all the various ups and downs of the way that the feed-in tariff has meant that the installations have soared and then fallen back and soared again. What they're involved in installing is solar PV systems, but also battery storage and electric vehicle charging points. And overall, they've installed over 1,000 systems, right from the smallest domestic right up through to what you might describe as solar PV farms at a utility scale. And they're interested in helping customers take advantage of greater control over their energy bills and fighting climate change. Our company is called the Green Group, and it's effectively the marketing and communication arm of the Solar Streets campaign. So we create all of the flyers, banners, posters and web pages that you'll see in the next few pages in terms of what we do from there. We're also the people who liaise between all the groups involved. So it's either the Green Group or the council and IDEA themselves to make sure that we get the best customer experience for the homeowners in the area. There's various different contacts that we've got there, and I know you're recording this, so you can come back to us with any questions via that as well at a later stage. So where has Solar Streets happened before? So the first town it started at was Frome in Somerset, quite famous as a transition town and very forward thinking. It was actually Frome who invited IDEA to respond to a tender to ensure that they could bring cost-effective solar panels to the people of the town. The second area was in the area of Wells and Glastonbury, and you can see why that these were the initial towns, because at that time IDEA had their only depot at that time in Westbury in Wiltshire, so that's why they started off down the west. Then a move over to West Berkshire, which covered the Thatcham and Newbury areas. And then the first town that we got involved was the Green Group, which was Henley-on-Thames. And that was quite notable because it started just before COVID struck and effectively got delayed while the construction industry, of which obviously this is, had to take a few months off and then restart again. Next came St Albans, a very big city with a very large potential in Hertfordshire up there, and that also led to the starting or opening of a second branch, which is in High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire. And I note that Farringdon is equidistant between depot in High Wycombe and the one in Westbury. So you've got the option of which depot can serve installations in Farringdon. Then there's Bruton and Castle Carey, and this is a good example where the sort of economics and the numbers involved in Bruton were too small, so they teamed up with nearby Castle Carey to ensure that there was enough people to guarantee that a sufficient number could be gained. And then finally, Tame, which is South Oxfordshire, and they started their scheme a few months ago, and they have now started having installations done in their town as well. So when you get involved in installing renewable energy, you've got to ensure that any provider has got all of the appropriate qualifications that you need. And that includes being a member of the MCS, the micro generation certificates scheme. That's right. So basically that's necessary to ensure that in the old days that the customer got the feed-in tariff, and in now the solar export guarantee. So that's important. HICE is an example of a consumer protection organisation. What this does is cover the consumer against any possibility of losing their deposit, because in the likely event that the supplier went bust during the time between taking the deposit and installing, then the customer would be covered by that. And then you've got something called NAPIT, which means it's a way of proving that the supplier has got all the necessary insurance for the scheme. And the last one that's not on there is about self-certification of electrical appliances, so that you to do certain types of installation, you have to certify the electrical work on that. So IDEA has all of those qualifications, so is very well suited to doing this kind of work. So the key thing about this system is about getting a good effective price as a result of the bulk installation. So what we do is we focus on a town such as Farringdon at a time, and then we try and group installations into blocks of 10. And what that means is that we save money during the survey process on scaffolding and installation versus doing a separate single quote. And then what that enables us to do is work with the councils and the local green groups to raise awareness of the scheme. So we can buy in bulk for the equipment and deliver all of the economies that we've got shown over there. And a great example is when you move the scaffolding from one house to another house very nearby, rather than having to take it back and then bring it back somewhere else the following day. And then with the next element, so we've got the bulk price discount, and the second one is the community benefit. So what we do there is that we try and estimate the number of installations that we are going to get in a town based on a 1% take-up rate of the owner-occupiers in the town. So based on the census data for Farringdon, there were 3,800 homes, of which 2,500 were owner-occupiers. So taking the 1% turn-up rate that we've achieved in Frome, which is the first town, that would mean that there'd be 25 installations expected in the town of Farringdon, which is significantly in excess of the 10 that we need as a minimum number. That would mean that the carbon savings on those systems, if they're all the typical systems, would work out at something like 26 tonnes of carbon saved per year. And then the number of community fund donations, which is at £50 per installation, would add up to about 1,250. But a lot of towns, and I don't know Farringdon very well, but a lot of towns have actually expanded quite a lot since the 2011 census. So it may be that the potential could be quite a lot bigger than what we've suggested there. There are the standard offering has basically got a fixed price of £4,000 for a 4 kilowatt peak system, and that is stated as a from £4,000. And there are potentials to have increases in the price if there are access problems with the roof or other issues as well. And the sort of optional extras that you can add on to the basic system are things like batteries, which is very interesting if you are, for example, out all day and you want to maximize the output of your system that you can actually use yourself. So all of that electricity is generated by the system, held in the battery, and when you come home during the evening, you actually draw the electricity from the battery system before you start drawing it from the grid. Hot water heating is another thing that you can use some of that solar output for by installing a device called an iBoost system, which costs about another £330. And what that does, it effectively installs another element into your water tank that is powered by the solar system and can help generate hot water, thus reducing the demand for usually gas in your boiler to do that part of it as well. And then the way we would price it is it's £4,000 for that 4 kilowatt system, but if it's a larger roof or a greater consumption or smaller roof, then a different value is charged. And what you tend to find is that the fewer panels you have, the actual pounds per watt installed goes up, and if it's more, it goes down. And that's simply because there are certain fixed costs, such as the inverter, which converts the electricity from direct current to a usable AC current, and also the scaffolding is quite a fixed cost as well. And as a final point, and proving quite popular these days as well, IDEA can also install electric vehicle charging points. So this is the process if a customer wants to decide to go ahead, and this is the first part, which is free. So basically the customer says, here's my address, and they send that through to IDEA, and then what they do is conduct a desktop survey, which they're looking at Google Earth to provide a lot of the information of. So that tends to look at the orientation of the roof. It looks at the size of the roof and also sees whether there is any shading issues which might reduce the potential output from that property. So all of that can be done without a visit to the property there. And what that will basically do is say whether the project is viable or not. And probably about 80% of the applications we get there at stage are viable. And then what has to happen is that there is a physical visit to the property to check out things like the roof status, the siting of the inverter, and also how it will connect to the existing wiring system. And all that's filled under social distancing, and all of that is free. And as a result of that visit, there is a full quote which explains what you would get, how much output would be produced. But note, there is no hard sell in this system. I've personally experienced people doing hard sell of solar panels, and that's not what this about. This is about providing an individual quote to the circumstances of this property. And then if somebody decides to go ahead, they put forward a 25% deposit. And what we tend to do is get a group of people ready to install, and then we take all the deposits at the same time because we're going to group the installations together. Once they've paid their deposit, they're given a date for the installation. And then the panels are installed, and only when the householder is happy with the final installation do they sign the satisfaction note and pay the final remaining amounts of the policy. So how do we market this? And this is where working with the local green group and the council comes in. So what we first of all do is we create a web page, and this is under the solarstreets.co.uk website, and then it's / the town name, and as well as a little bit of information about the scheme, including the promoters for that area. It'll also show a number of installations talking about the economics of solar panels, an optional energy deal we've got, and a similar presentation to this, so people can actually share this page with people as well. And it shows also an installation video, which I'll show you in a second. So that's what a Solar Streets webpage looks like. And on the right there, you can see an example of a sponsoring organisation. So this is St Albans, and you can see here that it is actually the St Albans City and District Council who has agreed to endorse Solar Streets. And they've endorsed that based on some due diligence they've done on the whole scheme by asking a load of questions and also taking up some references of some of the schemes that have already been done elsewhere. And we can also do Q&A sessions via Zoom, which we advertise on the website. So here's a short video, which I hope will work, which shows you how you install solar panels. Hoping this comes through quickly. Yep. Okay, so the next sort of stage that we do is we tend to market the programme using a number of A5 leaflets. We try and get the community to get involved in distributing of, and you can see there, this is a different example of the way another scheme has been portrayed. This is Tame. So their sponsor there is Tame Green Living, which is actually a body that has the support of the council, and that's looking about how that they can turn Tame into a greener place. We can also do banners and posters, and you can see there that's a banner for Tame again, and again you can see the Tame Green Living plan, of which the Solar Streets is part that you've got there. And then finally, we used to do town hall presentations, but post-COVID that's not been possible. But what we have found useful, and you can see there that's in St Albans again, is having a gazebo where we can still have conversations with people and answer their individual questions, as well as doing that in the Q&A sessions as well. There's a few quotes here. I won't go through all of those there, but you can see that there's people there from Frome, which are happy that they're still actually generating even during dull days, because you don't need pure beautiful sunny days to produce solar energy. You still produce some even on the dullest days as well. It's interesting that people often think about they're doing something to save the environment for the future, not just for themselves, but for their own children going forward. And it's also a relatively cheap price to install. And then that's a big system that's been tooled there, a 16-panel system as part of the initiative in Wells. So one of the questions that we're often asked is that now that there's no feed-in tariff, is there still a good rate of return on solar PV? I think the answer to that is basically yes. Fundamentally, the price of panels has come down quite a lot over the last 10 years or so, and a system which would have cost you something like £16,000 is now at this offer price of £4,000. So that's fallen quite dramatically. Having the opportunity to generate electricity on your roof makes you think about how you use that electricity, and it particularly applies to the appliances that use the most electricity, such as tumble dryers and washing machines and so on. So you tend to think about scheduling those appliances and using them during the day to use some of your own solar output. Electricity prices have gone up double the rate of inflation over the past 10 years, and with changes in the grid and smart metering, etc., that's probably likely to continue. So your electricity prices are going to go up by more than inflation. So the more electricity you save over a period of time, the more you will save financially as well. And even though the feed-in tariff disappeared, what you can still get these days is something called the solar export guarantee. So you can sell the excess electricity you don't leave yourself, but we have to say that that varies by supplier, and the biggest amount you can get is about 5 pence per kilowatt hour, whereas what you are saving on the input into your property is usually 15p per hour. So in terms of economics, you're far better saving the electricity and using your solar output yourself rather than exporting it. But of course, your payback on the panels, which can be anything from about probably a minimum of about 7 years to about 15 years. Once you've paid for those panels, then you're getting literally free electricity for the rest of the life of that system, which is typically about 25 years. So far, throughout the whole scheme of Solar Streets, we've had over 300 inquiries. We've done over 200 surveys, and we've got 100 installations completed, and it's rising. And in recent weeks, we've been doing on average about one a day. So that's quite a big number that we're doing. And of course, we've saved over 100 tons of carbon per year as well. Here's just a few happy customers, and you can see here you've got different size properties and different shapes of solar panels being installed, and those are all via the Solar Street scheme. The community benefit we mentioned earlier, based on £50 per residential install and £100 per every business. This is what it was spent on in Frome, which was the first place it was done. You can see there it's on the top of the roof on the left hand side there. They're just finishing the installation off by putting the scaffolding up. And basically what the Solar Street scheme did was pay for half of that installation. So the youth club paid for the other half by itself. And what that's meant is it's reducing their energy bills, which means that they've got more money to spend on the activities they provide for the youth in the town. So the spirit of the scheme, this is from the director of IDEA. It's basically about providing good value quality installations, but note it says bespoke installations. Some online solar installers do not do a specific quote for a specific property. They don't take all of the roof elements into account, and they don't do a home survey as IDEA do there as well, and they will only recommend an appropriate size system that fits in with the individual's consumption. So in these days where you're not getting a huge amount for what you don't use yourself, there's no point in putting in more panels than you use to get a good ratio of your use versus what you can produce from the system as well. Very quickly on how does it work. So the solar panels go on the roof. The photovoltaic cells turn the sun's light into electricity that is converted via an inverter from DC to usable AC electricity, and then it's either used in the home or the excess is surplus to the grid. And on the left hand side you'll see there that it's got an indication that the best direction for a roof is painting south. That is true, but you can still get quite decent outputs on anything from east through south to west. And if, for example, you had quite a lot of usage in the morning or in the late afternoon, it might be as well to have an east facing roof or a west facing roof. On to the final bit here, what happens during COVID. So obviously safety is the primary concern, so that we ask if there's anybody who's high risk in the property. We ensure that there's no visitors to the property, and all of the space around the areas where the survey needs to get to is cleared in advance. The social distancing is applied, and the surveyor wears masks and gloves and sprays any touch surfaces with antibacterial spray. And when you come to the installation, it's exactly the same thing. The only difference being that it's great to have some way in which the engineers can actually fill up water bottles, but also to make sure that there's plenty of clearance around the area where the scaffolding is, which will be obviously usually in the garden space as well. So, but apart from that, it follows exactly the same procedure. And that's it. So I will stop sharing and invite questions.
Thank you very much, Andy. Just for clarification, I think that there are exactly 3,800 houses in Farringdon now. I think your census data probably included some of the other, because there were only 3,000 houses in 2011. You probably, when they do the census, sometimes they get the data included for Great Coxwell and the surrounding villages. So there are about 3,800 houses now. Just to say, I've had solar panels for the past 10 years, 2.2 kilowatt installation, and it generates about 2,000 kilowatt hours a year, which was half our electricity generation. So I'm a convert already.
Brilliant, good to hear.
Any questions, please, for Andy? Kira.
Hi, yes, thank you. That was very interesting. I'm also a convert with my own solar panels, and I wondered if you're looking at 4 kilowatt. How many panels is that on a roof? Yeah,
so since we started the scheme, used to take up 14 panels, but it's now down to 12 panels because we're using 340 watts. So it's a 12 panel system, and if people want to play around with their roof size, each panel is 1 meter wide and 1.7 meters deep. So that would take up, I don't know what that would be, about probably 20 meters squared, to give you a rough idea of how much that would be. So I think it's probably less panels these days than what it would have been a few years ago.
That's quite a big roof, isn't it? Thinking.
I would say it's probably a 3-bedroomed, large 3-bedroom semi or a 4-bedroom detached. I think the average size that is installed is slightly lower than that. It's probably a 10-panel system, so that would take. So
is there a reduction if it's £4,000 to do the 4 kilowatts? Is it less, proportionally less? depending
It
on.
is, but it's a slightly skewed relationship, as I tried to explain before. That because there's certain fixed costs in, the pounds per watt installed goes down the more panels you put in. So off the top of my head, I don't know what it is, but it'd be probably like something like 3,700, 3,800 for 10 panels, whereas something like 14 panels would probably be about 4,300. But it's all based on a similar scale, based on savings that we'd expect to achieve versus a standalone system, and that savings about 20% plus.
And what's the average size panels that you're putting in, as in quantity?
I think it's working out about 10 at the moment. So it's probably about 3,500, 3,400, 3,500. But some bigger systems as well. But probably slightly smaller than that, I would think.
Thank you.
No problem.
Andy, I presume, unlike the happy days, then when we actually had a feed-in tariff, you will need a meter, which will be the export meter, which obviously those with a feed-in tariff don't need.
That's correct. Yeah. So that you can claim. So how this smart export guarantee thing works is basically you have an export meter which goes to your supplier, and they actually install it. So you have to ask them to install it as part of the process, and then the credit that's calculated based on the number of kilowatt hours you've exported is then put as a credit in your electricity bill.
Right. So that could be a problem if you want to change suppliers every year, like I do.
Yeah. I mean, they're supposed to be doing these SMEPS 2 export meters, so they're supposed to be remotely changeable. But whether everybody's doing that quite at the moment, I'm not quite sure. The people we recommend as a supplier, and they're the only supplier who would give us a commission to add to the community benefit, is Octopus Energy, and they'll certainly fit an export meter for you as part of the process.
Any other questions? Kira?
Yes. Your installation people, are they working for you or are they on contract per?
So they don't work for us personally, they work for IDEA, but they are employees of IDEA. And IDEA, who are the installer, that's the person who the customer is contracting with, that's who the customer is paying. We are effectively the marketing side of the Solar Street scheme, working in partnership with them.
Thank you.
Do you know if they're paid a living wage?
I would think so, because a lot of them are electricians, so they're going to be certainly paid considerably more than that. So they tend to be paid quite a lot of electricians. I've never been asked that though. I'll gladly check it out for you then.
Steve?
Thank you, Mike. A couple of questions, and it's basically on take up and perhaps ways to maximise the take up. We've got an awful lot of new build going on in Farringdon at the moment. Do you ever approach developers with a view to sort of putting a package forward for them? And secondly, we also have quite a lot of social housing. Do you work with housing associations?
So that's tricky questions. I'm quite surprised that developers are not required to have renewable technology as part of their design, but they don't appear to be. So usually we don't work with the developer, we work with individual people who do that. Although I think that is something that increasingly the government will have to force people to do if they're going to continue to increase renewable energy production. The difficulty with social housing is that the beneficiary of solar panels is the person who pays the electricity bill. So that tends to be the tenant. So the only way the owner of the social housing can get any benefit is if they can encourage people to take up the offer and effectively charge them more rent for that sort of solar system. Again, that's not a model that's been cracked at the moment, but I think it's something that, again, if we're going to, have more local micro generation, that's another thing that we have to crack. But there hasn't been a way of doing it so far. There's a lot of people who've talked to us about it, but they can't quite see how they can pay for it and then get some money back off the tenant. It's not like doing heat pumps where you can get the renewable heat incentive to go back to the person who owns the heat pump. It's very different with solar panels. So difficult in both cases, unfortunately, at the moment.
Yeah. Any other questions for Andy? Right, thanks, Andy. Next steps then.
So I think what our view is that the concept has been brought to the town to decide whether they want to pursue it or not. We've found in the past that if the council is more obviously involved in its endorsement, and I say it's an endorsement rather than a recommendation, they're just welcoming the concept of solar streets to town, then I think the council should probably invite some due diligence of the scheme, and probably by asking some of the other towns that have done it whether it's worked well for them. We've had a frequently asked questions document I've already supplied, I think, to Marcia, so that you can all sort of do that. But what I would suggest is think about what other evidence you'd like to hear about from the scheme, and either ask us direct questions, or if you'd like us to provide some references, then I can share that with Marcia as well. And if all of that's satisfactory, then we'd look to try and get a marketing plan that is either worked out with the town council or a relevant green group that the council's working with, and probably try and launch it for, I would thought, probably something like February or March, because we've already got we've got 3 launching in January, and we've got Abingdon and Didcot who are going through a very similar process to yourself, and we'd hope that we'd be concluding their process slightly before you, probably in February. So I'd probably suggest doing some of that due diligence work over Christmas and early into January, and if everybody's happy with that, then we could move into the next stage of actually agreeing a marketing plan.
Thank you. Just to check, Sally, I presume we could discuss this, put it off formally on the agenda for the January meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can do that.
Then we can, sorry.
In the meantime, Marcia could be doing some due diligence. I can never say that word. But yeah, and then we can get it on the agenda, and we'll have the due diligence. Oh, someone else say it. We'll have that to discuss.
Okay.
Just a quick question, if I may, Mike. Andy, are there other companies doing a similar thing to you?
So what I would say is that I don't think there's anybody who's doing a combined effectively bulk discount with a community benefit who's been able to show that they've done it elsewhere before. I think sometimes in St Albans we actually went into a tender situation, and they asked local companies to effectively quote for it as well, and we won the quote simply because of the level of pricing, and also the fact we could say that we've done it before and have got the ability to market the scheme to get a reasonable number of people. I don't think there's anybody doing directly everything that we're doing, including the marketing, community benefit and the bulk discount.
Thanks, Han. Just one quick one. If you've already got solar panels installed, if someone wanted to expand, can they do that?
You can, but you'd probably have to put it in as a separate system, because if you've had it for a long, if you've had it for a long time, you're probably getting the feed-in tariff off the original system.
Yeah,
you would therefore have to put in a secondary system and another inverter to link up. So yeah, it is possible if you've got plenty of roof space to do it, but I would question, if you've already got plenty of panels on there, do you actually need any more self-produced electricity?
It's just a thought that some people in Farringdon have had them in for a long time. That's all. They might want, perhaps because it was very expensive in the early days.
And the batteries, Mike. I'd be interested in knowing about batteries and storage.
Certainly, water heating would be a real bonus. Because that would be very important to be able to do that, because that's one way of storing your electricity when you're not using.
Absolutely.
In the middle of the summer, when what do you do?
Yep.
Thank you very much, Andy, for that. That's very informative.
I shall leave you to it. Leave you to decide later on, and Merry Christmas.
You're very welcome to stay, but I know you're not going to.
Okay, thanks then. Goodbye.
Item 7 then, reports from outside bodies. Thames Valley Police are unable to provide a report because their systems are down, so they couldn't access the statistics. They're awaiting an intro for the new neighbourhood sergeant to set up a reporting system. Okay. 7B then, Traffic Advisory Committee. There was a traffic advisory on Friday morning. Who's going to report on that? Is that Marcia?
Yes. Yeah, I think the FATAC minutes have been, which have been provisionally approved by by Councillor Hitchcock has been circulated yesterday or today. So sorry, let me just bring it up to my screen so I can just go through it.
I can say one good point. I'd actually listened to it, and it was interesting that the average speed survey had showed that the average speed through Farringdon, I think it was about 21 miles per hour was the most. So it's below the criterion of 24 miles per hour, so that we could have a 20-mile-an-hour zone. So the next stage is
so that was
to the consultation, and it was hoped that the county council may be able to pick the cost of that, because they could get some SIL money, and so they're expecting 20,000 from SIL money, so they may be able to cover the £3,190 cost of the survey, but that's to be confirmed. So we can proceed the consultation for 20-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Yes, so what was discussed, we had an update from the OCC officers. He kind of kindly translated for us the figures that were given to us by the transport monitoring officer. We were told that the 4 speed survey were allocated in London Street, Marlborough Street, Gloucester Street and Church Street presented an average speed of between 18 and 19, 20 speed limit. So everything was below the 24, which is required to install without further measures the 20 speed limit. So now, as Councillor Wise was saying, the next stage will be to discuss with the councillors at the next planning committee whether we want to approve and go further with the consultation. The cost of the consultation, which is of 3,190, will be covered by highways. And like Councillor Wise has just said, they recently bid for 20,000 SIL money, and they think they should really receive it, so they could cover the cost of the entire project. And the time scale then for the payment, for them to receive the payment, will be about January and February 2021. So yeah, so we'll just bring this matter to planning and see what the council decide. The second update was from the cycle scheme. We were told by the OCC officers, Lee Turner, that obviously drawing and being prepared to deliver the project in January. Obviously the project will take like clearance of vegetation and clear marking, refreshed and restated in areas like Ferndale Street, and perhaps they will potentially explore the possibility of a cycle warning sign, just because there is a junction in Ferndale Street, in the crossing between Ferndale and Southampton Street. Other updates, you just read in the minutes. They're just a report on the 5 cycle stands that recently been installed in the summertime, and there will be several areas of Farringdon considered for micro asphalt resurfacing. They don't know yet the location. They don't want to disclose yet the location. They're just confirming budget first. So that was what was discussed, basically. That's it.
A couple of information points that the changeover for parking is proceeding, and also perhaps following that we could have a review of double yellow lines, but best not to have done that before the civil parking enforcement comes in, to see how things will change, because if the civil parking starts to displace a lot of cars from the road, it'll be very interesting to see where they go. So watch this space. And also Lee Turner came up with a very interesting fact about the missing half of the gateway, which was taken down by Builders Eade to build Stickley Court, and apparently it was put on a pallet. It was actually owned by the district council, but it went to the county council depot at Drayton and has disappeared. So obviously someone's probably got a new drive made out of Cotswold stone somewhere. Anyway, it's got lost, so it looks like we won't see that again.
Mike, actually, I do have an update for that. Councillor Grant contacted the enforcement team, and they did come back to us confirming that the condition does still apply. They can enforce the developer, to replace the wall. We will be in touch with the developer ourselves and ask how to go forward. Obviously, because it was discussed by the councillor to perhaps replace the original wall with something with a structure a little bit smaller in the two entrances to Farringdon that don't have any welcoming sign yet. But of course, we'll need to work with highways in terms of safety and visibility issues. So we'll work on this in a different occasion.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Marcia? Thank you.
Councillor, or Judith.
Thank you. Item C then, Twinning Association. We have had a report. We have had a report from Twinning Association. Has it been circulated?
That's their AGM report. Yes, that should have been. I can't see it on the papers though.
No. I think basically everything's in abeyance for the Twinning Association. I think the only thing that could be planned when talking about having a quiz with the French on the 31st of December as a farewell. But all events for next year are still in abeyance until we get clarification in terms of COVID. So we'll have to wait and see. Of course, this year should have been the 30th anniversary of the Twinning Association. So it's a great pity that we'll catch up in the future. So there's not much to report, unfortunately, from that. D then, Oxfordshire Neighbourhood Plans Alliance. Both Jane and I attended the Zoom meeting for the AGM, and the reports have been circulated. They seem to have formed themselves into quite an effective lobbying body as regards things like the white paper and looking at the growth board and trying to influence local development in terms of the making sure that they take on neighbourhood plans on the basis that people who've done neighbourhood plans actually know a lot about their local area, and therefore their expertise should be of great value in terms of planning, but they're still knocking on that door. So there's a full set of papers there for people to read on that. Any questions on that?
Mike, I think Jane might have a question.
Jane.
I attended the meeting but couldn't join in. There was a conflict between their software and my software, and the only way it could be dealt with was to give me the passcode, and I couldn't contact anybody to actually get the passcode, which was really irritating. And there has to be some way on Zoom meetings that they allow people to contact them if they've got problems joining. Anyway, I did have something to say at the meeting, and that was about neighbourhood plans, because the training thing I did the week before, I brought up the question of neighbourhood plans and the legality of them, and they are not aspirations or fancy ideas. They are actually legally, the officers at the planning department are legally obliged to try their best to get developers to comply with our policies. But I couldn't say that in the meeting because I couldn't get through.
No, I did raise a point about the fact that we weren't getting good collaboration in some cases with the Vale of White Horse. Our representative Linda Inglis for Vale said that we should have contacted, is it Ricardo Dios, but he's neighbourhood planning officer or in charge of neighbourhood planning, and this isn't the problem. When Andrew Marsden was our representative, he had the same thing meeting, and he didn't get to talk to the planning officers. It was pushed onto the neighbourhood planning people, which isn't what's needed. It's trying to get to the planning officers, because we had particular problems with Highworth Road, although perhaps we did have more success with land south of Steeds. Anyway, we have to watch this space, and as Jane said, neighbourhood plans are part of the local plan and therefore should be legally enforceable. But it seems that some district councils take it more seriously than others. Moving on then, so item 8, County Council's report. Councillor Heathcote.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wise. First of all, can I talk the Solar Street schemes, Tame? The two councillors for that area are county councillors. I know that the scheme in Tame was sponsored by the Tame Green Living, but if you wanted me to write to the councillors on your behalf, perhaps you want to discuss this between yourselves, I can see if they've had any vibes at all as to any problems with this particular company, but come back to me on that. That was just a thought. And of course, Henley, that's the person there is a county councillor, so I could get in touch with them. But talk amongst yourself and come back to me on that one.
Thank you.
Park Road.
With someone from Henley. We had a meeting with someone from Henley, but it won't be very useful to liaise with Marcia to talk through Tame. So thank you for your offer. Thank you.
That's okay. Then there was talk prior to your meeting starting tonight, and there's been conversation during your meeting in connection with Park Road and mud on the road. Can I say that that is part of a planning condition that's put on, that developers have to make sure that when they leave the site, they leave their vehicles are clean and do not leave detritus on the road. And many of them have to wash their tyres before they leave their developments. If and Councillor Grant and I have been liaising between ourselves on this particular item of Park Road, and if for any reason the developers should choose not to be helpful, the county council will come on board, and it then becomes a legal situation, which I think is best if you leave that as something you do as a last resort. So David and the district council are dealing with the problems of the mud on the road, and I heard Councillor Bentley saying there was mud on the Highworth Road. So if you contact the district councillors, they'll see what the conditions are on the planning application. I have circulated today about Bloor Homes Park Road. I was advised by the developer that they're going to be starting work on the 4th of January on Park Road with services. They will do the utility tracing and investigation for a 1-week period, and then we'll be following by work to do gas and electric work, and they'll be doing foul and storm water outfalls, and they're 4-week periods. And then they're followed by S278 carriageway work for 11-week period. And they are proposing to put in traffic lights. Now, what I have done this afternoon, as I say, I've circulated this to Sally, so I'm sure she'll let you see the paperwork. But I have spoken to the developer and said they must make sure that the traffic lights, when they're put in, are their sequential program of red stopping traffic, and it isn't too long, that the traffic builds up on Park Road, because we all know the volume of traffic at commuter times. I mean, the backlog could be horrendous. And we also know that there is service traffic coming to service the stores down that road. So I've asked them to keep me informed. And I would also like you to keep me informed, and I will make sure that officers intervene should there be a problem with the sequencing of their traffic lights, and that's starting on the 4th of January. I've also circulated today the COVID-19 vaccination programme, and I can say that the Churchill Hospital of the OUH NHS Foundation Trust has been selected as one of the hubs to roll out the vaccination programme in the county, and the hub will serve residents across Oxfordshire, Bucks and West Berkshire in the first instance, and the vaccine will be given first to people from each county who are either most at risk or in need because of their work, and the vaccination will also be prioritised for those aged 80 and over. So I'm afraid that means that we're not in that yet. Mike, are we? I know we joke about our ages, but we're not there yet. But I have circulated that too. My report, I know, is long this month, and I don't intend talking about every point on there. But what I did want to pick up on, I put in there the COVID-19 alert levels for Tier 2, just in case any one of you wasn't sure of what they were. I picked up on trading standards and the sale of illegal cigarettes. And the reason I picked that up is not only is it in my portfolio, but of course what it underlines is people selling illegal tobacco, which of course is not refined and can harm, but also that smoking can harm people, their health. And of course that then costs us with public health and our health services. So I thought that was worth you knowing. I also put safety messages in, and two there that really concern me. Chimneys. We have an open fire. Do always have your chimney swept before you start lighting your fires in the autumn, and then also have it cleaned at the end of the season, because it can cause awful damage to properties when there are chimneys fires. I've seen it, seen whole houses destroyed because of it. And then I've put in there a safety first message about the disposal of ash, because that can be self-combustible if it's just left and you never put hot ashes into a wheelie bin. To most of us, this is common sense, but I can say that the fire service have been out to incidents where people have put hot ashes into a dustbin that was in a shed, and in a shed they got turpentine and other substances that could ignite. So it is a serious point. I've put in there about libraries reopening. So we've got our library. I've also put in the good news, apprenticeships are in my portfolio. In fact, they're in Children's Education and Families portfolio and Adult Social Care. And I can tell you that it's lovely. We've got a local girl who's managed to secure an apprenticeship. The Adult Social Care Department Directorate helped her, and she's now hoping to become a social worker. So I thought that was worth advising you of. And I guess the last thing that I was going to pick up on for you, the new speeding task force group. When I spoke at Traffic Advisory, we're going to put that on the agenda for our March meeting next year. The new speeding task force, it's only just been born, if you like, and I thought it would be sensible that by March they'd probably have quite a lot that they'd be able to tell us, because Chris Hume, as the Thames Valley Police rep on Traffic Advisory, agreed, and so that'll be an agenda item in March, so we can see exactly how that work is progressing. And I'll leave it there, Chairman, and finish by saying, can I wish you all a really happy Christmas and New Year. It's going to be a different Christmas for many of us, but just stay safe and take care of each other.
Thank you very much, Judith, and I'm sure we express the same feelings to you. Thank you very much for that. Questions, please, for Judith. Anybody? Stephen.
Yeah, thanks for that, Judith. The stuff about the distribution centres and the vaccination centres I'm dealing with on a kind of work-related basis. And you're right, so there are going to be 7 hubs across southeast England, of which obviously the one hosted by the trust, which is Oxford University Hospitals Trust. And that'll be a distribution centre for the distribution centre. But the actual vaccine centres, i.e. the locations where people can and will be vaccinated, haven't been decided yet. So it was just in case anybody had thought that, well, we're all going to have to go up to the John Radcliffe to get vaccinated. That will be, if you imagine that's the hub, that's the spoke of the wheel, and the vaccinations will come out from there. And there are going to be 7 of them across the area. But the one in Bob is from the OUH, as Judith said.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
you, Councillor Smith. In actual fact, as I say, I sent this through and I was trying to paraphrase to make sure you didn't have me sitting here for hours talking to you.
Thank you. Anybody else got a comment for Councillor Heathcote? No, thank you very much for that, Judith. And again, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'll leave your meeting, Chairman, because I've been at meetings since 8 o'clock this morning. So thank you.
Thank you. We don't have a report from the district councillors, and I didn't send a chairman's activity report because I've only had one thing to report, and that's that I attended the Christmas market on Saturday. Just to say it was very well attended, and thanks to David Reynolds for providing music, and to Al Kane, who were collecting money for the food bank. And very good to see that the Farcycles have got the pop-up shop in the toy shop going again. They're concentrating on children's bikes as a priority for Christmas. But it was very good to see the market so busy, particularly with the charity things like Yoko, were selling things, and other people, the Pump House Project. But it was really vibrant, and everybody's making good use of the seats, which is very good to see. Unfortunately, the weather was nice, which made all the difference. So thank you very much to those who were collecting money, and particularly to Al Kane and David Reynolds for their donations for the food bank. Now then, item 11, reports from committees. And the first we have is from Planning and Highways of 25th of November, which has been circulated. Anything to say on that, Jane?
Not really. I've got what I was going to say now. I think really the only one is further on down the list of the agenda today, and that's the naming of streets. But we'll come to that when we get to it. Anybody else got anything to say?
So any questions on the Planning and Highways? Yeah.
I've just got a question about this enforcement, because I'm sure most of you are aware I'm hot on the planning permission side of things, and I do feel like this isn't just me. Like, this affects the whole of the town. So the mud on the road affects the whole of the town. The cutting down of trees affects the whole of the town. And I wonder whether we ought to be doing something as a council to make these complaints, rather than me personally as an individual. Just throwing it out there.
From my point of view, I feel that the officers the planning officers are supposedly working for us and the Vale, but they don't seem to be working for us. They just seem to do what they feel and advise the councils of what they think, and that shouldn't be the way. This is supposed to be a democracy, and they should be working. We're paying them to work for us, not to work for the developers. So they should be enforcing things that the developers aren't complying with.
But taking Kira's point, I wonder if there's something we could do in terms of if people have got complaints, that perhaps one of our officers could contact the Vale. Perhaps it would carry a bit more weight if that were the case. Do you think that's viable, Sally?
Yeah, we can do that. We did today when someone called and complained about the trees cutting down. We don't put any council opinion on there. We just asked the question, should these trees be cut down? Could you look into it? So yeah, Marcia did that today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that's a good idea. I think if we keep on them, I think they'll realise it was serious. Yeah.
I don't think the district council's officers are working for the district council or us. They seem to have their own opinions and just run roughshod over the people who are paying their wages, who is us.
Okay.
Okay, that's
Thank
my
you.
opinion.
Thank you. Anything else on Planning and Highways? You notice the county council have agreed or recommended a location for the remaining bit of the gateway. So that was thanks to Liz as well, who actually contributed to that. So next is Community and Partnerships, 2nd of December, last week. Now, Betha isn't here, but I'm sure we can field any questions. We did endorse 3 grants to the Brownies, to the junior school for the purchase of Chromebooks, and to Be Free as normal procedure for young carers.
And also Yoko, Mike.
And Yoko, yeah. Yeah, I saw Christine Douglas on Saturday, and Yoko's trying to go ahead as best they can. They don't know about their trip to Kenya, which would be scheduled for about July. I have to wait and see if that takes place, but that's on there. And just one thing that Christine was saying, she would like to try and reach out to some of the more difficult to contact young people. Those that congregate under the old town hall, and she's hoping that they could perhaps talk to them through pizzas and coffee to try and find out what their problems are, which I think is very, very good of her. Okay, anything else on community and partnerships? It's a very busy meeting, so there's a lot of good decisions made there. Item 12 then, Clerk's report and schedule of payments, and that's to receive and consider schedule of payments up to and including December the 9th, which we have before us. Anything to say on that, Sally?
No, that's completely up to date now.
Okay, so can I propose that we pay those invoices? Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Kira. Thank you, Steve. All those in favour, do you want to vote a formal vote, or can we hands up, Sally? Everybody in favour? Everybody's in favour. I can see. Thank you. Nobody's against. Thank you very much. And next is to receive and consider the clerk's activity report. Anything to say on that, Sally?
No, nothing to add.
Okay. So the next item then is Farringdon Neighbourhood Plan, to consider revising the neighbourhood plan. I did circulate something this morning about the things that you can do for updating. Really, there are three categories, which is basically minor, which can be done without any resource to inspection or referendum. It says correcting errors. Things that don't really affect the policies, so wording basically outside the policies. Next is material modifications, which don't change the plan, then wouldn't require referendum, but may have other implications. It may need to go to an examiner, if that were the case, to make sure that they aren't significant in changing the nature of the plan. And finally, sort of major mods, into which do change the plan, which would require examination and referendum. And of course, all this comes at a cost. Note that our neighbourhood plan runs until 2031. So at the moment, there's no requirement to review or update it. There's information on the government website, and I put the link, which isn't a link actually, it's just the URL to communicate. It's interesting, it said about the neighbourhood area will already be designated, but the community may wish to consider whether the designated area is still the most suitable area to plan for. Well, of course, we've been informed that as far as, say, the developments on Coxwell Road are concerned, as far as neighbourhood planning is concerned, these are still part of the Great Coxwell neighbourhood plan. So one possibility might be to look at extending the boundary of the Farringdon neighbourhood plan to bring those in, although it won't really make much difference because the planning has already been done for that. And again, if you look at the government website, it's all about how many more houses can you actually add onto your neighbourhood plan. But I would point out that a neighbourhood plan isn't just a neighbourhood plan. It depends how far you want to go with this. Neighbourhood plan, we've had 3 versions of neighbourhood plan. I rewrote the first one, and I rewrote the second one as well. So we've had 3 versions of that. An evidence-based review, which I had to rewrite after the second submission, because if you rewrite a neighbourhood plan, it's out of date. A basic condition statement, which is probably the most important document, where you have to make sure that you agree with the basic conditions with respect to planning law and also what was then European law and so on. A strategic environmental assessment, spelt wrongly, which you really need a consultant to do for you. A consultation statement, I actually looked at the consultation statement again, and it's one document I recommend people should read because it does report a very good history of the actual process that we had to go through, because we ended up going through 5 consultations, 2 examinations and a referendum on our neighbourhood plan, and also an equality impact statement where you have to make sure that the neighbourhood plan doesn't affect anybody with disabilities or whatever other reason. So it's not just the neighbourhood plan, you've got to make sure that any changes do agree to all these other documents, so it's quite a lot. The other item I'd mention, if you're going to do this, it's going to cost you money. And I put in the costs of our original neighbourhood plan that was submitted in April. Sorry, it was submitted in July 2014. That was the cost, and you can see it was nearly £20,000. Because the problem is rewriting policies, you've got to make sure that they're legal and enforceable, and that you hope the district council planning officers will actually take note of it. So I've just put a little bit of background in there just to explain the levels of neighbourhood plan. Now, I don't know who's proposed this, but whoever has, do you want to talk to it, to say why you want to change, why you want to update the neighbourhood plan?
So it was Jane. Okay,
Jane, go ahead.
Right, I was on that planning refresher course for councillors, and neighbourhood plans came into it. Neighbourhood plans need to be revised when there are changes, like our boundary changes and other things that have happened in the town. But while what I found the sting in the tail is, while the neighbourhood plan is being revised, it is no longer in force, which I found a bit weird. So it's a bit of a scorpion. You need to revise it, but while you're revising it, what was there isn't legal. I just found that odd.
Right, if you want to revise it, you know, think about, first of all, you're going to have to need staff time. You'll need a working party, presumably to set up a project plan to actually go through the neighbourhood plan, to see what does want changing and ascertain costs, and to look at the benefits of revision. Now, have we got any volunteers who actually want to look at revising the neighbourhood plan?
I'm quite happy to look at revising it, but remember that while it's being revised, the old one is, I don't know what you call it, not enforced.
It goes into abeyance.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you presumably the first step would be to look at the neighbourhood plan to see what would need changing before you actually make a formal approach to the
because the longer the process goes on, the longer it's in abeyance.
In this documentation, we are the qualifying body. So, for instance, the district council couldn't make any changes to our neighbourhood plan without consulting us first and getting our approval. I don't know what the process is now. Presume they've got a better setup established with the district council in terms of neighbourhood planning than when we started, because we were the first in the Vale of Whitehorse. The only other local neighbourhood plan was that for Tame, which was in South Oxfordshire. We were both front runners, so there was very little experience throughout the system in terms not just the district council, but certainly examiners. So I think the system's probably better now, but to do this, you would have to take advice from the district council to see what help we would get. Last time we didn't get a lot, to be honest, because it really depended upon using consultants, because we don't have the expertise to do it.
But it was so new at the time. I think everybody, including the consultants, didn't know what they were doing.
Now, the other problem we've got is that the actual document itself, the PDF, is a modification of the original Allies and Morrison report, which was considerably changed, and they did it in their own format with their own fonts. And we had to go to the professional planning office, DPDS in Swindon, to actually get the thing printed or to actually modified, and it is layer on top of layer on top of layer. It's an extremely complicated document. I've got the simple Word version, but actually changing it will be very difficult, and it cost us 500 quid last time when the third version of the neighbourhood plan was produced. So we've got some logistical problems. Personally, I don't want to get involved. I've had enough.
Steve's got his hand up, Mike.
Steve?
I'm not sure as to volunteer.
No, absolutely not to volunteer. But you know, I appreciate the work that's gone into the neighbourhood plans and the various versions of the neighbourhood plan that Mike has produced. And let's be honest about this, it is Mike who has driven this. Other councillors have been involved, but without Mike's input, it wouldn't have happened. So if we're going to go down this road again, we need someone to step into Mike's shoes. I would suggest that if we're going to look at this, we need a cost-benefit analysis to understand exactly what we're doing before we start the process formally, and we want it laid before council exactly the benefits of undertaking a new version of the neighbourhood plan. One question that comes to mind is our existing neighbourhood plan presumably doesn't cover houses that are being built outside of what was at the time the council boundary. I don't know where we stand with that, but given that we've had very little influence over what happens anyway, and the neighbourhood plan has done very little to mitigate any housing developments we might not have thought were appropriate. It seems to me that the value of going through the process again is dubious if we're going to get the benefits of SIL payments and so on the back of our existing neighbourhood plan. So I would suggest we're very cautious about the possibility of undertaking the whole thing again.
Can I just say before Jane comes in, as far as the developments on Coxwell Road are concerned, they're covered by the Great Coxwell neighbourhood plan, which was actually very good in terms of design, and I think it was equally ignored by the Vale because we did have this big argument about 3-storey houses or 2.5-storey houses. So we are covered by that, and we do work very closely with Great Coxwell. So we're fortunate that way. But you're absolutely right, Steve. I think we've not seen a great deal of, apart, as you said, apart from the SIL, that we do get 25% instead of 14%. We haven't seen a great deal of benefit from it. Jane?
Yeah, actually, Steve's right. We're lucky that we get on well with Great Coxwell and they agree with us. However, the main reason for revising the neighbourhood plan at the moment is that they will not include the new estates within Farringdon because the old neighbourhood plan has those estates in Great Coxwell still. So to include those in Farringdon, because they've moved the boundaries, we have to revise the neighbourhood plan.
Yeah, but they're built, aren't they? I mean, the neighbourhood planning is about, as far as the government's concerned, adding more houses. Yes. We aren't going to do that because the Vale's already had as many houses, well, more houses than we can cope with anyway. The thing is
not to announce that we're revising it anyway, because until we do say that publicly, the old neighbourhood plan still stands. And it's still legal. It's while we're revising it, we have a problem.
Mike, Kira has the hand up.
Yeah, I see Kira.
Thank you. A couple of observations, really. I think Jane's point about not announcing that we're revising it is very poignant because we have one. It seems to be fit for purpose. Dubious, but it's in situ and it's got us the benefits that we, were lucky enough to have from the get-go because the council that was worked so hard to get it have done a good job. But I think we all accept it. There are parts of it that perhaps need a tweak or attention. I perhaps would like to know where we think at the moment are areas that ought to be looked at that perhaps are outdated, because I'm not sure what those are. And Steve's point about saying we can then analyse what the benefit of changing that or updating it would be, because we don't want to jump into something, and I'm not seeing lots of people putting their hands forward to do the amount of work that was involved to get it going. I think it's such a specialist, you know, you've got to have the right mind for it, haven't you? You've got to have the understanding and the history and understand what it is that we want to get out of it. And I think it's a huge piece of work, really, that went on. But I can't help but think, could we not just tweak what needs to be updated? But how easy or not that is, I don't know.
Well, we can tweak it, but someone needs to sit down and read it and find out what they don't like. I can't do it because I'm too close to it. You know, it's no good. It's no good my taking part. But you need dedicated people who are actually taking an interest and they'll go through it and actually see what they want to change. Until you do that, it's no point in going further. You could set up a working party, if you want to, but you could have people who are going to be prepared to work and go through it and do it. Jane.
I think you're right. You, me, and Andrew were too close to it. This was all started by Alan Hickmore, by the way. And we had to take over when he died. It needs some of the new councillors to look at it thoroughly and see what they think, because they might have a completely different take on some of the policies.
I agree, and I think we've got to, the town council's got to take ownership of this, so you've got to buy into it. If you don't buy into it, if you're not going to be keen enough to actually look into it, don't bother. But if you are, please do, because it does. If he doesn't need revision, have a look at it. I can provide you with the text documents that you can look at, because I'm probably the only person with them. But that's it. And it might you'll probably need money if you want to change things as well. And you can see how much it cost us last time. And the Vale of White Horse had a grant of 20,000. They had a lot of money, actually. I reckon they ended up with about £45,000 out of the government, of which we saw very little because they kept the money for themselves. Oh, we had costs, they said. Yeah. Okay. Next step.
Sorry, Mike, can I come in? I've had my hand up for a bit. I've heard nothing tonight that makes me, no facts anyway, that convinces me that we need to revise it. Okay, I mean, people have talked about revision and some bits are out of date, but I haven't heard any facts about. I just, at this moment in time, if there was a vote on whether we should revise it, I would vote against revising it. But I agree with Steve, we need to look at it rather than revise it. Someone needs to decide if we're going to revise it, why are we revising it, what for, and is it worth doing?
Yeah, good point, Pete.
But at the moment, I don't think we should consider revising it until that's done.
Joe, are you there, Joe?
Yes, I'm here.
Joe, can I ask, what Great Coxwell revised theirs? What was the reason for doing that, and how did you do it?
We just did the minor ones. But we had we've got a dedicated neighbourhood plan team who's done it and liaises with the parish council, but we've only did minor revisions, and it's just been passed again. Yeah.
So that's the difference, isn't it? You've got an active neighbourhood planning team who are taking interest, and you've got people with expertise who want to do this.
Yes, exactly. But it was only minor things we did so they could get passed through very easily.
Right.
What sort of minor things, Joe? What are we talking about?
Would you like me to have a look at it, and then I can send you an email from my different account?
Yes, that would be very useful.
And I will get our neighbourhood team to do a summary for you, and then I will send it via Great Coxwell.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And if we could know how much that costs the parish council as well, that would be helpful.
I know it costs us nothing.
Yeah, and the mechanism for doing it, Joe, if you could let us know that would be very useful.
Yes, of course I will. Yeah, I can do that.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. I think if we do that, if Joe sends us that information, then I think you need to consider whether you want to set up a working party. I mean, there may be other councillors who aren't here tonight who would be willing to do it. So until we get some volunteers, let's move on. Item 14 then. Street name.
His hand up.
Sorry. Who?
Steve's got his hand up.
Oh, Steve, sorry.
Sorry, Mike, I don't want to prolong the discussion, and you'd moved on, but I was going to propose that we send this back to planning and ask them to come forward with a proposal if they have one, a costed proposal to bring to council, rather than just, you know, what we've discussed tonight is a bit wishy-washy, isn't it? We need to actually know what we're considering, rather than just the mammoth task of revising the neighbourhood plan. So if it's going to come forward again, I suggest it needs to come through planning with a costed analysis, a cost benefit analysis, so that we can take a definite decision on it.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Steve. And particularly if we get the information from Joe about the sorts of things that were used as minor changes and why they did it, we get a good idea of what could be done. So
Yeah,
put that
okay.
back onto planning and highways. Can we do that? Put it on Mark's, yeah,
That
please.
sounds good.
Planning and highways.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, any more on that? No. Okay, item 14 then, street naming policy. And this street naming policy is suggested by Councillor Swallow. We've got a paper before us. Anybody want to talk to it? Can I say something? I'm dead against changing our existing policy. I did send out a list. Actually, it's only part of the list has appeared for, it says World War I. The World War II bit got missed off. But basically, there are 135 names between the First World War and Second World War memorials. So far, we've got 36 streets named. There are some streets which by chance have the same names, like Carey Close, and it isn't named after William Henry Edward Carey. It's actually named after somebody else, but we couldn't change that. So there's one or two, like Lydiard's Row isn't named after Leo Stanley Lydiard. So there are 3 streets with the same name. We've named 14 streets, so 17 streets named in total. So that's 36 streets. I've got names which are those from the War Memorial. The District Council wouldn't allow us to use names which are similar. For instance, we put forward Goodbody, but they rejected that because that was too close to Goodlake Avenue. So anything which is sort of similar might cause confusion. I looked through these and I reckon we've got about 90 potential street names left, because some are duplicated. Obviously, there are several Hallings, Fords. You can't have 2 of those. But we've not got 90 potential street names. And my view is that this was the best thing. I don't know if I recommended it, but it was a long time ago, either at Planning and Highways or on the War Memorial Trust, that we name streets after people on the War Memorial, because these are the people that need to be remembered, and those had given their lives. And it's not just for the people on the War Memorial, it's for their families, because that means they are remembered, because these people had, they had mothers, they had children, and the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and the joy that it generates when you see families coming together for a street naming, they really do appreciate it. So I would propose that we don't change it until, I would say, we have a policy that we normally we would name streets after those on the War Memorial. In exceptional circumstances, we could consider changing. We could name something. We have done in the past, for instance. One of the streets on Folly Park View was named after one of Blawholme's managers who died, and we have named other streets of people who are not necessarily on the War Memorial. So in exceptional circumstances, we can do that. But I would really hope that we could carry on with this policy of honouring those people on the War Memorial who are Farringdon people who have given their lives for our futures.
Stephen Smith has his hand up, Mike.
Stephen.
Thanks, Mike. We obviously had a discussion at the committee on it, and what Liz has put forward is, I think, more of a discussion paper than a kind of policy proposal paper. But one of the things it does pick out, I think, is one of the crux issues here, which is that the names on the War Memorial, it's a closed list and it's an exclusively male list. So our current policy, as I understand it, is custom and practice rather than a formally set down policy. And I should say, before I actually make the point I want to make, I'm very much in favour of what the council does at the moment in terms of drawing names off of the war memorial. I think it's appropriate. I think it's clear and obvious, and there's public support, and I think it's something that's worthy of retaining. But if we're going to move away from it, and I think we ought to at least give consideration to it, then we have to think about what we do in terms of, and three of the factors I think that were named in Lizzie's paper. And she said we have to do something that reflects the history and heritage of the town, that reflects the diversity of Farringdon as a town or community, and also to recognise exceptional civic and community service. And I think those are three worthwhile, sensible criteria, I think, for us to adopt. I don't think either that we should entirely rule out in a policy document, for example, not naming a street or a road after someone who's alive, because in exceptional circumstances that would be appropriate. If somebody invents a vaccine for COVID, for example, comes from us town, I think we would probably want to commemorate that. So I guess my alternative suggestion, rather than just the status quo as it stands, is to alternate, so that names are that we formally set down in policy that we draw names from the war memorial, alternating with names of people on the basis of the criteria I set out before, i.e. the reflecting the history and heritage of Farringdon, reflecting the diversity of the town and community, and recognising exceptional civic and community service, because I don't think it's I think just on the basis of the gender alone, I'm not really sure it's tenable for us to continue with that. But that's my contribution on it anyway.
Thank you, Steve. I think
Mike, Jane's got a hand up.
Yeah, but just say we might already have done all the names that are for history. That's the other problem. The point about about there being all male, of course, that was a circumstance. There's only one female with a war memorial that I knew of, and that was in down the road. Good heavens, help me. What's the next village down after Buckland? Anyway, it's Winifred Absalom, interim wardrist, and she was in the she was a signaller, and she died after the war. Unfortunately, she isn't from Farringdon, but I mean, there's an example of someone who did exemplary service and again died of Spanish flu. Not everybody died, of course, in the war. For instance, I was looking at a possible contribution. One of them could be, there's a chap called Council who died after the First World War of Spanish flu, and of course Council is the jewellers that where Waymark is now, who put the clock in, for instance. So sometimes you can actually pick up two, effectively kill two birds with one stone in that, in actually getting a local family as well as the someone off the war memorial. Jane.
Mike's got a hand, sorry.
Jane.
Sorry, yeah, Mike, what you said earlier on about Gilligan's Way, he was the foreman in charge of building that estate, but really, did we choose to put his name in there? Because he really, other than being the foreman of building that estate, had absolutely nothing else to do with Farringdon.
No, Bloor Holmes asked us for it because he was very instrumental in building that site.
Yeah.
Apparently, he was very well, loved in Bloor.
No, I knew he was a friend of mine. He's a lovely man. No, I agree with that. But I chucked this to the council because the last planning and highways meeting was only just core 8, and I didn't think such a small number of people should discuss this.
So, Mike, you have a proposal from Stephen that we put a proper policy in place, alternating with war memorial and the names as set out with the 3 criteria. So that's where we are at the moment. We've got that proposal in place.
Do you have a seconder?
Doesn't seem like it.
Kimberly seconded, Mike.
Okay, could I put a counter proposal that we stick with what we've been doing in the past and consider names off the war memorial first, and in exceptional circumstances, take somebody else. Can I have a second?
Abstain, please.
One.
Can I abstain, please? I don't want to vote on this.
I'll second that, Mike.
Because I can see both sides, and I just don't want to, which is why I chucked it to council anyway.
Do you want to vote on it then? You want to take Stephen's proposal first? All those in favour?
You have to take yours first, Mike.
Do we?
As I understand most meetings.
Sorry, Peter, you're absolutely right. I'm getting old. So do you want to take my proposal that we stick with the status quo of naming people off the War Memorial in exceptional circumstances? We'll consider other names. Can I propose that? All those in favour of that, please show. You need a hands up on this one, Sally.
Yes, please, because we've got
right. So we can hands up on this one. I'll find me thing. Right.
So that's 4 in favour at the moment.
Has everybody voted for that? Okay. Now, can we take Stephen's proposal then, please? That's
You'd have to do those against, Mike.
Do you want to do those against?
Well, you need to make a decision on this, and then if this one fails, you go back to Stephen.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at the number of people we've got. Sorry, Peter. Yes, all those against, please. What do you think this one? HD?
Just hands up again, thank you.
Against, then. We're voting against this proposal, yeah.
So I think we've got 3 against.
I think you've got 4 now.
4 against.
You got the casting vote, Mike.
Well, I will stick with the.
Steve, have you voted or are you abstaining?
Stephen.
I voted on the. I voted in support of Mike.
Okay.
Has everybody voted or abstained? Did Jamie, you've abstained? Are there 9 of us then at this meeting, Sally?
Yeah.
We should have 4 for, 4 for, 4 against, and 1 abstention. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So if I give my casting vote, and I'll take it for my proposal. But I think I agree with what Stephen said. I think we don't need to be completely uptight about this. When I'm sure we can take in other considerations. It may be that some of the names that we've got on the War Memorial may not be acceptable anyway, so we could look for alternatives. But the thing is, then, if people could actually make recommendations as alternatives, then they ought to be considered. At the moment, we don't have many altered. And at the moment, in terms of names, what have we got left? We've got Park Road, basically, as the maximum number of streets to be named. I think there might be 1 or 2 on Highworth. We've got 8 nominations for Highworth Road at the moment to come in. Right. Thank you for that.
So Mike, just to clarify, we have eight names to choose. So we are going to choose them from the War Memorial.
Yeah.
Would you like me to put a formal proposal together and bring to the next meeting so we do have a policy in place? Because at the moment, as Stephen said, it is just historic. We haven't actually got a policy in place.
Custom and practice, yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Stephen. That's the way we've done it. Yeah, it was custom and practice. We never did have a policy. It was just assumed, as you rightly say. I've got some suggestions for the names. Can I circulate them as we did before? I think last time we did quite well off people from Dunkirk. Maybe 1 or 2 of those, but I've got some others. I would suggest Banbury, Council, Cobden, Burgess as perhaps 4. and worth looking at others to see, you know, who's worthy. And I think you need names.
I can summarise those and circulate them round.
Yeah, I'll have a look. I didn't want to do any more work on this in case we didn't go with this policy anymore. But if anybody has got suggestions of those of the War Memorial, it would be very useful, and particularly if there are still families living in Farringdon who've lost people who may want to support this. Thank you very much for that. Item 15 then, Christmas lunch for vulnerable residents. To say, the food bank were proposing to provide 50 cooked lunches and deliver them to lonely residents and wanted to use the corn exchange. However, a community initiative has started where people cook for their neighbours. It's suggested the town council support this and the food bank possibly provide a big lunch in the corn exchange when people can get together again. Any comments on that? I think that sounds like a very good idea.
We have Kira. That's the question.
Kira, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's laudable that the food bank wanted to do this sort of big Christmas lunch, but in terms of practicality, not just, you know, the COVID restrictions, but the volunteers that are required on Christmas Day to do that. How do you pick these 50 people? Do they really want to come to the town hall? You know, where is the need for that in Farringdon? I haven't seen that, and I'd be prepared to stand corrected if somebody can show me the need. And the community action is come forward from the community. It's a really simple solution. They're just asking that if you've got a lot of food, and most of us do have excess food, that you plate up an extra dinner or maybe two, and you could deliver that to a neighbour or somebody in your vicinity. And I think just as a recipient as well, that's a much nicer idea. It feels far less institutionalised than sort of going for your free Christmas dinner from the charitable people who are doing that. I think I would be very keen for the council to support the community initiative of extra plates.
Okay. Steve. Steve?
I think he's frozen, mate.
No, he's gone. He is, isn't he? His hands have gone down. Did you want to say anything, Stephen? Did your hand was up?
No, no.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that I'm not in favour of people cooking their neighbours.
No, that's probably.
I'm in favour of people cooking for their neighbours, but I'm not in favour of cooking their neighbours. But anyway, that's.
Wait till after January the 1st.
Yeah, give it. Wait, let's wait for the post-Brexit dystopia to develop.
Sally, where do we go?
It was for information only, really, because, like I say, the food bank would much rather it was a community-led project. They were putting it in place because there had been a need identified, and they did have both the donations and the volunteers in place, but they would much prefer a community initiative because that's got much more longevity, and these people might make lasting friendships. So so just for information.
I think in happier times, I mean, there was a lunch club at the Baptist Church, wasn't there, that did this, and also in the Bowls Club, they used to have I think they used to have a weekly lunch, didn't they? But that was organised. I can't remember who organised that, but that did provide lunches for people at least once a week. Particularly old people, if I remember rightly.
I think several councillors have mentioned in the past perhaps a big lunch. So maybe when we can do that in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Item 16 then, items for information only. First is the corn exchange floor has been fixed. Do you want to tell us about that, Sally?
Yeah, so the 3 planks along the middle of the hall just popped up. So they were standing proud by about 7 inches. So they popped up in a triangle shape. So obviously that was quite distressing, but we got the company out, and what's happened is apparently the water where the water level has risen with lots of rain recently, because obviously the Corn Exchange hasn't got a damp proof course or anything, and actually it's dirt underneath the subfloor, the water had ridden up and the subfloor had 50% condensation, 50% moisture registered, and that caused because there was no heating on in the hall for a week or so, that caused the floor to pop up. But he said the guy who fixed it today said there was absolutely nothing that we can do. It's the age of the building, and it's not only our hall, it's been several halls in the area. Womburgh, where I live, it's happened. All their parquet floorings come up, and that's the age of the buildings and the water coming under the hall and the wood moving. So he said, so they've taken a whole centimetre out of one of the planks. So that was a massive strip of wood they've had to take out. And they've put a bit more breathe room in there, but they think that as the water level drops and the boards dry, there will be a bigger gap, so we'll have to have them back to put a new plank in eventually. But he said there's nothing you can do. It's just a case of keeping on top of it. And he did recommend that we kept the hall at a constant heat of 16 degrees, particularly when it's raining. He said the cold weather didn't matter, it was the rain. So yeah, it's fixed now and we can open tomorrow, so our users are very pleased.
It's a problem with wood, isn't it? Cellulose. Right. Oh dear. Okay, I'm glad that's fixed. So with the blood transfusion people had to cancel, did they?
They did, yeah, but they're rebooked, so.
And next one, of course, is congratulations on your first class honours degree, Town Clerk. So well done.
Thank you very much.
Yes. We need it. We'll need photographs of the degree congregation. You'll only be allowed 2 people, won't you? So. Any other items of information?
Can I just ask about the trees in Park Road, these 20, 50-foot trees allegedly that have been chopped down? Sally, did you say we'd put a complaint in?
We just raised it with the planning officer because obviously we don't know if they should be or not, but a member of the public rang to bring it to our attention. So Mark Tier just sent an email to the planning officer to ask if this was the correct, what should be happening.
Okay, because it wasn't on the plans to chop those trees down.
Okay.
And whilst we're on a tree, I seem to be the tree ambassador this week. I've received an email from a member of the public through my council email address complaining about cutting down of trees in Folly Park, which I forwarded onto Sally, obviously, and David Grant is dealing with that because it's district council property, but it does appear that there wasn't ever permission for them to cut it down, and they're cutting through a cycle scramble type trail. So investigations will go on with that, I'm sure. Thank you.
Can I ask, is that the district council who's cut them down, or just?
No, it isn't.
They didn't have permission to do it, so.
Ah, okay. Thank you.
Marcia has just said that she will forward, as soon as she has a response from the planning officer, she'll forward it to all members.
Sally, can I ask, when you say they didn't have permission, who we're talking about there?
We don't know. We don't know, that they were just members of the public.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
I don't think they were very big trees, not like the ones on Park Road, which were 50 years old or something like that. They look more like sort of saplings, but they were grown up and they've cut a path through to make their scramble ride on their bikes, apparently.
Which trees on Park Road were cut down?
On the verge, apparently. I haven't seen it.
On either side, by any chance?
There were 20 trees that were 50 foot.
For a few days, so I haven't been along that way for a few days, so I don't know. But if it's the ones that were an avenue on the verge, they were put in by this council.
I know there were beech trees. That's all the info I've got.
And if so, they belong to us. and so they shouldn't be chopped down without our permission.
Hmm.
I'll go and have a look tomorrow.
Okay.
You do that, Jane.
Stephen?
I just wanted to ask, Lucy lives in that road, just if she'd seen anything on her travels.
I did. There have been, I think there's only about 3 or 4 in Clifton, right at the very top. You know, near the corner entrance to the field, right next to our house. In fact, just opposite the medical centre. There's a few. One of them was dead and has been dead for a long time. But there were a few living trees cut down. It's not that many. The avenue is still there, mostly.
No, thank you,
But
Lucy.
it's difficult to tell because it's all you know, the view is changing daily. Now that the entrance way has moved, you're a little bit disorientated when you look at it when you're driving past. So it's difficult to remember what it looked like before sometimes.
I would like to just say at least Bloor Homes gave people notice that they're going to dig the road up, which is unlike anywhere else in Farringdon, where people just dig it up anyway. But at least we know that there's going to be problems on Park Road. Any other items for information?
Nope.
No. Okay. Correspondence. We've got a list of correspondence. Anything to say on that, Sally?
No, it's all been circulated, so it's just if members have any questions or any comments or they need any further information.
Okay. Any comments? Nice to see the ventures appreciated, isn't it? That's I think one of the best things we've done in recent times. Well done. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. I'd like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And
you too.
Keep safe. And
Stay
let's
safe.
look forward to a happier 2021 when we all get our injections.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, good night.
Steve, we are staying open, the food bank. So we're
Yes,
open
thank you. I'm
all
sorry,
the way
I-
through
my
Christmas
internet
yet.
dropped at a crucial moment when I was going to ask that question
Yeah.
during the debate on the Christmas lunches.
Yeah.
Okay. And hope to see
Monday.
everybody on the 17th for the finance meeting.
Yeah, 17th. And facilities on the 16th, of course.
Oh,
Don't
of course.
forget facilities.
And plan is on the
We
21st.
have like mulled wine and mince pies and everything. You've got to be there.
Virtual malt pies.
Well, I think the
Okay,
planning
Brick-
one on
Brick
the
Road and,
23rd.
Right.
Look, Kimberley's on the same beach that I am.
Right.
Oh, Peter, he knew.
Right. Well, you can all go home now. Oh.
Hi.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye, Councillor Martin.
Bye.
Say hi to Billy and Freddie. They go night night. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Jane. Bye.
Bye.